Hi guys, it's Tess. Welcome back to the Quiet Tess ASMR channel. Tonight's video is a little bit of an impromptu. I know I haven't stayed on schedule as planned, but I've been kind of focusing on my gaming channel a bit more lately. And I've also been turning these really cool ideas in my head for some future ASMR videos that I really want to share with you guys. But those take some preparation. They're new projects for me that I haven't tried before, so I want to try to get them right the first time. So those are in the works. Tonight's video is more of an impromptu video. As you can tell from the title, this video is more focused on PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress syndrome or disorder, depending on who says it. This topic is very close to me because as of, I think, almost 3 years ago now, I was actually diagnosed with PTSD from certain incidents in my childhood that we won't be going in depth. But because I have dealt with PTSD on a daily basis, I understand how hard it is to deal with the symptoms, and I wanted to try to help other people who also deal with PTSD. I have used ASMR as a way to help cope with it, and I wanted to contribute to the pool of resources, so to speak, to help cope with the symptoms. So I'm testing out a new mic tonight. I don't have a fluffy cover for him. But we're going to test out the mic as we go. It's going to be a little bit of a ramble and some exercises here. So if you're willing to join me, just sit back and relax. Try to get comfortable wherever you are. If you're currently dealing with symptoms from PTSD, if you're in a hypervigilant mode, if you are in a more active state of not feeling safe, know that even with the doubts, you are safe here. And we're going to get through it together. Now, I am not a mental health professional. I cannot diagnose, and none of this here is medical advice. This is mostly anecdotal. But some of this is going to be tips that I have received from my therapist over the years. And hopefully they'll help you too. So, first, the biggest step is grounding yourself. So, if you would like to have your feet flat on the floor, do so. If you'd like to just sit back, comfortable wherever you are, or laying down, whichever feels safest to you, go ahead and do that. I'm just going to relax here in my chair, because I tend to sink into hypervigilance often. I get constant tension in my neck and along my shoulders. So I tend to have very tense, solid muscles right here. Just going to take my hands and I'm going to squeeze and release. Kind of let that roll down my back. Deep breath in if you can. And exhale. You are safe here. Even if your doubts may try to tell you otherwise, you are safe here in this moment with me. There are no expectations. There are no dangers, no threats. Only the ones here, if you allow them. I want you to try to think of a calm, safe place, either imaginary or real, that you've been to wherever. Just think of a place that feels calm, serene, and safe. For myself, it is an imaginary cabin by the beach. Be aware of your body. Don't judge it, just be aware of it. Be aware of what it's feeling. Be aware of where it's tense. You don't have to untense them right now unless you feel like you really need to. But just be aware of your body. Where are you most tense? If you're sweaty, notice that. If you're shaking in your hands or otherwise, just notice that. It's okay. We're just noticing things. This is not a practice of hypervigilance. This is just being aware without judgment. We're not looking for threats. We are only being aware of our body. Take a deep breath if you can, as deep as you can. Hold and release. I'm going to brush the mic here very gently with my fingers. I want you to just focus on those sounds. And breathe. Okay. It is safe here. You are safe. It's okay to just be. To not do anything. To just be. Just be aware of the moment you are in right now with me. Continue to breathe. Oftentimes, those of us who struggle with PTSD, we have a constant, whether it's conscious or subconscious, need to control, because with control comes safety, or at least the sense of it. So if you must control something in this moment, control your breathing. That's all you need to be in control of right now, is your breathing. And focus on that. Each breath, take a deep hold, and when you exhale, let out any feelings of tension, any feelings of fear, any feelings of blame or guilt, any feelings of inadequacy. Just let them go. Breathe in. Hold. And release that stuff that doesn't serve you. If you must control something in this moment, just control your breathing. And allow yourself to feel safe as is comfortable. I myself, when I began therapy, and I went through similar guided meditations with my therapist, I had a very difficult time allowing myself to feel safe, and I still do some days. And one of the things I learned is that if you force yourself to be safe, it's one of the most counterproductive things ever. So instead of forcing myself to feel safe, because I cannot completely control that, despite my best efforts, I learned that it was okay to allow myself to feel safe as was comfortable in the moment. Otherwise, I was just causing another fight in my own brain and with my body. And that, of course, does not provide the feeling of safety. It backfires. So again, just allow yourself to feel safe as is comfortable. And breathe. And when you're ready, allow yourself to breathe normal. Just let that autonomous part of your body, that part of your body that does things without you having to think about them, your digestive system, your breathing, sleep. Allow that to ease over and take care of those processes for you. As you ease into that, I'm going to, for those who may not fully understand what PTSD is and what causes it, we're just going to have a little boring ramble about it while you allow yourself to feel safe as comfortable. Post-traumatic stress disorder is, at its root, caused by a traumatic event in which causes someone to feel in danger, that their bodily self or even their life is in danger, to the point that it rewires your brain. What happens when a traumatic event occurs in someone's life to where PTSD becomes a part of their life? It is because the brain is feeling so threatened and so needs to try to repair that loss of safety that it will rewire itself to try to prevent from that event or anything similar to it from happening again. Now, when I mean rewire, I mean literally those who have PTSD, and it varies in certain levels. Some people's brains chemicals alter at different intensities than others, but for the norm, there is a hormone in the body that you may have heard of known as cortisol. Cortisol is the hormone that helps the body break down adrenaline. Cortisol is often released in the body during high times of stress. It is also the hormone that your brain releases when it says it's time to wake up and helps you to wake up. It's released in much high doses when you have nightmares. That's the hormone that causes the sitting up in bed panting from a nightmare response. It's the cortisol. That's what wakes you up. It's the mixture of adrenaline and the cortisol. When someone experiences a traumatic event to the point of forming PTSD, the brain, how best to describe it, essentially that lizard reptilian brain that is over the fight or flight responses as we know them, in a way becomes so agitated or startled that it forces the brain to permanently change its chemical composition. It then produces a constant boost and release of cortisol. This is where hypervigilance comes in. This is where the part of the nightmares, the night terrors, and the flashbacks come in. It's because the event was so traumatic for that person that the brain said we need to change in order to protect ourselves. And while that is, in a way, very handy, unfortunately, the brain's fail-safes, so to speak, are not exactly the most healthy. Thus, PTSD, among other fail-safes, such as dissociative identity disorder, for example, and other mental illnesses and disabilities. But those are perhaps for another time. We're just focusing on PTSD tonight. Now, when I talk about a traumatic event, this is something that people often become a little confused when someone like me, who has not served in the military, says, how can you have PTSD? Obviously, we associate PTSD with veterans. After all, what is more life-threatening than putting your life on the line in service? Constantly putting yourself in danger. Obviously, that's going to have some traumatic effects. And we've seen the representations and the interpretations from Hollywood of military servicemen and women experiencing PTSD. And these are not to say inaccurate, but unfortunately a stereotype has evolved, believing that the only way you get PTSD is if you're in the military or perhaps first responder, say like a policeman. Now, this is not necessarily inaccurate either. However, what constitute as a life-threatening or extremely harmful event for someone varies from person to person. So some people even get PTSD not from something that they experienced. You can also get PTSD from observing someone else going through a significantly traumatic event. There are many cases of people who get PTSD from seeing someone else experience a violent car wreck, for example, or some other situation where there was bodily harm or a life in danger. We also know that PTSD can occur from living through abusive situations and people, and various types of abuse. And those who are family members of or loved ones, say as children who have parents that have PTSD, if those parents are not aware that that's what they have and develop negative and perhaps violent behaviors because of them not being able to cope with their PTSD, can therefore give it to their children, for example. Like many mental illnesses, PTSD in a way can be passed down, even though it's not genetic. So PTSD also does not look the same for everyone, just as the reason why we have PTSD is not the same for everyone. Some of the symptoms of PTSD may look like positive things, not a symptom of a disorder. For example, I'm extremely guilty of this one. Overachievers or perfectionists, people who work and work and work, extremely hard workers. Overworking can actually be a symptom of PTSD. The reason this happens, in this case, as was explained to me, those who have the symptom of overworking are doing this because if they stay busy, then they don't have time to think about the traumatic event. They don't have time to be aware that they don't feel safe. They don't have time or the concentration to notice what they're feeling because they don't feel safe. Working well under pressure sounds like a great thing. That too can be a sign of PTSD. It's akin to that analogy of a duck on water. They look calm on the surface, but underneath they're paddling like hell. That can also be a symptom of PTSD. Let's see. I'm trying to think of some less known symptoms. Flashbacks, of course. We all know about flashbacks of PTSD. Flashbacks are different than just remembering the traumatic event. Flashbacks. There's the Metallica song that came out on their most recent album, Hardwired to Self-Destruct, called Confusion, which was actually written about military servicemen and women who experienced PTSD, and one of the lines in this song is trapped in a memory. And when I heard this song for the first time, that was one of the best descriptions I've ever heard of what the flashbacks are like. It's not that you're remembering them, it's that your brain, for whatever reason, being triggered, forces you to not just remember, but relive the memory, and you are stuck in it. It is a very sticky, tricky situation. It's a very uncomfortable feeling because, in a way, your brain is almost, for me, it's like reverting to having two brains. I have a brain that is aware in a way that I'm here in this time and place, and this is just a flashback, and it also feels like I have another brain that is having, not a memory, but living in that flashback, that traumatic event, all over again and again and again until I can force myself back to the present. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. I'm learning more coping skills as I go. And grounding, much like we did at the beginning, was one of them. Another symptom that people may not talk about is feeling emotions for no reason. For example, having a good day and you're cooking dinner or doing the dishes, and all of a sudden you start crying and you feel upset, but you don't know why. This, as was explained to me, is your body deciding that now is the time to process or reprocess the traumatic event that I did not process before properly or at all. It's annoying. This is why irritability in children, if they've gone through traumatic events, can have tantrums, terrible tantrums, and it's because all of a sudden they have a feeling, and where they're dealing with big feelings and they don't know how to deal with big feelings to begin with, that even adults have a hard time dealing with and coping with. The only way they can do it is they throw a fit, which can be very difficult for family members and parents who don't understand what's going on. One of the biggest coping tips I was given, techniques I should say, that my therapist taught me when I was learning to deal with the random emotions, was to be aware of the feeling. Notice it, be aware of it, don't judge it. That was the hard part. Don't judge it. We are so programmed in many cultures from a young age that this feeling is bad and this feeling is good, and you can't feel the bad because it has bad consequences, so you have to stop feeling that way. And it's very hard to unlearn. And I still sometimes wrestle with the concept of being aware and noticing my feeling and letting that feeling be what it is, and not trying to force myself to stop feeling that feeling. So after you become aware and you notice it and you don't judge the feeling and you let it just be, you imagine a little container. I like to imagine Tupperware boxes, just because I like to call these feelings my leftovers. These are my leftover feelings. I'm putting them in a leftover box, putting them in Tupperware. So I put that feeling I notice for what it is. I'm not forcing myself to stop feeling it. It's like talking to myself, saying, self, it's okay to feel this right now. It's okay to feel, but maybe right now is not the best time. We're not going to stop feeling it, but we're going to put this feeling in a box and allow it to be itself, and we're going to put that box away. We're not going to forget the box. We're going to take this leftover out at another time, reheat it, and process it, and deal with it. Just right now might not be the best time. My body thought it was the right time, but it's not the right time. So we'll do that later. We can feel that feeling, but we're not going to process the feeling. This technique is still a little bit of a tightrope for me. It's a balancing act. Sometimes I'm really good at it, other days not so much. One of the other things that I've experienced from my PTSD is sleep paralysis. Now, some of you may know what sleep paralysis is. For those who don't know or may not be fully aware, sleep paralysis is basically when your brain becomes fully awake, but the body's a little slow to catch up. Your brain's wide awake, but your body's still stuck in that deep sleep. And when you're in that deep sleep, your brain actually controls parts of your muscle responses so that you don't hurt yourself in your sleep or others. Like, instead of kicking a soccer ball in your dream, you don't kick the wall. Obviously, no, this doesn't always work because we've all heard about, dancing around in our sleep or sleepwalking. But when you have sleep paralysis, your brain wakes up and your body is not ready to wake up yet. It's still in that deep sleep, which is why you can't move. That's where the paralysis comes in. You're not permanently paralyzed. It's just that your body's not woken up yet. Now, because your brain has woken so suddenly, and it's so separated from the fact that the body's not awake with it, it essentially, someone told me once it was like your brain trying to wake your body up with a nightmare. And so that's where sleep paralysis demons come in, which are obviously not actually demons. What these are is they're auditory or visual hallucinations that your brain decides to manifest and make you experience in order to try to startle your body, for one, and also to say, am I really awake? Can I tell the difference between what's real and what's not? Somebody told me once as well that they described it as, my brain is bored waiting on my body, so it's going to watch a horror movie while it waits. Only it's not fun. I have struggled with that as well, but one of the biggest things that when I do experience the sleep paralysis and its hallucinations with it is to remind myself my body just needs to wake up. I'm not paralyzed, just my body's asleep. I needed a couple more minutes, and anything that happens right now in this moment is not real. And I know it's not real, and I'm not crazy. I'm just waiting for my body to wake up. Now, depending on whatever your hallucinations are, which often people see a shadowy figure, a demon, a ghost, something scary over them or near them or coming at them. And of course, when you see something like that and you just woke up and you're still kind of confused, it's very difficult to go, I know this isn't real. And that's okay. It's normal to have some fear and some sense of helplessness in that moment. That's a totally normal reaction. So if you experience that, don't be too hard on yourself. That just means that your body is trying to preserve itself. Alright, so let's take a moment now that I've rambled your ears off. Check in on your breathing. Have you let your automatic responses take over? Are you breathing normal? Are you breathing shallow? Are you still hyperventilating? How does your body feel? Are you relaxed? Is there still a little bit of tension, or are you still stiff? Again, we're just being aware. We're not judging. We're just taking stock of the moment. If you're still struggling with the signs of hypervigilance, which, by the way, for those of you who don't know what hypervigilance is, hypervigilance, which is a common symptom of PTSD, is the constant noticing of your surroundings in order to detect any sense of a threat. Oftentimes there isn't a threat, but you're perceiving everything like there's a constant threat. You just don't know where it is, what it is, and when it's going to come. For example, my most obvious sign of when I'm in hypervigilance is whenever I'm out and about, like when I go to have coffee with friends or eat out, or if I'm going to the movie theater, I have to sit in the back near the fire exit where I can see the entryway, so I can watch anybody and everybody that comes in and out of that door. So if somebody comes at me, for whatever reason, I will see it and I will know they're coming. That is hypervigilance. I do that to this day still subconsciously. I don't do it as much consciously as I used to be, but even now I still catching myself trying to get to the chair where I can see the entire room. We're not doing hypervigilance right now. We're being aware without being hypervigilant. Be aware of your body. Be aware of this moment, but know that there is not a threat, even if this is trying to convince you that there is. There is no threat. It is safe. You are safe. It's okay. Also, if you don't feel completely safe, you don't have to. But you can allow to let yourself feel safe. It's going to be okay. Even in times when it feels like it's not going to be okay, it is going to be okay. Deep breath. Hold. Let it out. Notice your tension. Is it still there? I tend to carry mine in my neck and in my shoulders. Even when I'm relaxed, I'm still catch myself letting my shoulders right up, and I have to let them relax. It's okay. It's going to be okay. I am safe. You are safe. I am strong enough to deal with anything that may arise. I am adequate. And I do not have to blame myself for every bad thing that happens. That's another thing with PTSD. Often, especially with those of abuse, various types of abuse, often those who develop PTSD also develop a sense of guilt and blame. Even if they're aware that in a conscious level that they are not to blame for what happened to them, they do subconsciously think, this was my fault and I need to prevent it from happening again. The reason this happens is not because they actually want to blame themselves. They don't actually think it's their fault. What's happening is the brain tends to feel more safe if you're at fault for something. Because if you're at fault, then you can control it and you can make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's a lot easier for our subconscious to deal with in some cases than it is to realize that this happened and it was completely out of my control and I might not ever be able to prevent it. And therefore I can't guarantee my own safety. It's quite a mixed bag. So, if you are blaming yourself right now, take a deep breath again. Let go of that guilt. It is not your fault. You don't have to have control all the time. If you're going to control something, just control yourself in this moment. Deep breath. Hold out. It's going to be okay. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I hope the sounds you experienced and my long, boring rambling perhaps, maybe, if you're lucky, put you to sleep. If at the very least, I hope it helps you out of your moment of panic or irritability. And at the very least, maybe you got the tingles. We might delve back into PTSD at another time. Give you some more coping strategies if you would like. And I hope you have a wonderful evening or day or morning, wherever you may be. Thanks for joining me. Can't wait to see you again.